Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unbridled Equestrian Podcast. Today we have Emma Kjelson, animal behaviorist, joining us. Now, Emma is the founder of Dynamic Equine, where she is dedicated to improving equine behavior and biomechanics through both a research and heart-led approach to horsemanship and finding unique solutions where other more standard and traditional systems maybe have failed to help the horses. She is also a partner of Annika McGivern, who we have had on the podcast recently as well. And together they run Illuminate Equine, where they work with both horses and riders to tackle the issues that they might be facing, whether biomechanic or rider mindset related. Emma is also the host of Friends on Horses podcast and our lovely guest today. So thank you so much for joining us, Emma. It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here, actually, and this is a lot of fun. Katrina very nicely moved our time a little bit for me today. I feel like it's been a bit of a day, so thanks for accommodating me.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a bit of a day on both sides because I nicely accommodated you and then couldn't get any of my tech working and then found out you couldn't get any of your tech working. So we are just making the best of it. But I think we're going to have a wonderful conversation regardless.
Yes, good job, us.
Yeah, exactly. We're pushing through. I am
Mhm.
still sick, as you guys can probably hear, but we're not letting it slow us down. I figure if I can't be out doing saddle fittings, then I am blessed to be able to be here and having wonderful conversations with incredible professionals that we can bring you. Emma, I would love to dive right in. And maybe to start, I do have some deep and insightful questions that I want to dig into, but would you mind just giving our audience a little bit of a sense of who you are and anything that I may have missed in your intro or anything that you're feeling particularly passionate about this year?
That's a great question. I am an equine behavior consultant through the IAABC, the International Association of Behavior Consultants. I am also really, I think the best way to put it would be like a movement science specialist.
Mm,
So, what I do is I combine those pieces. I combine kind of uh, movement, biomechanics, and fitness with the kind of a behaviorist model to both improve horse performance as well as have a kind of a big picture approach to problem solving, which
wonderful.
we need. We often need a lot of tools in our toolkit to problem solve with our horse friends. And there's always that horse, right? Always the horse that pushes us into
Absolutely.
learning something new. And usually when you've met that horse, that's when you're calling me. Uh,
Yes, I've certainly encountered countless horses like that in
mhm.
my career. And unfortunately, so often it's been really difficult to get them the help they need. So we need somebody like you here. Now, your work really sits at a cool intersection of the biomechanics and behavior side of things and also integrates psychology. So I'm curious, what originally drew you to this sort of integrated approach? And where did you initially notice the biggest gaps in how horses were traditionally being assessed or treated?
That's a great question. So actually, I think that I was always a little bit of a seeker. So I never really felt like I fit into your traditional lesson program. I would have been the why kid, right? And oh, hey, that's interesting. Why are they doing that over there? A lot of our coaches, they kind of go, this is the box that you must fit in. Why are you
Yes, I
asking
don't like
questions?
that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that that was kind of I always had a bit of a curious mindset. So maybe that's really started earlier than I think, but out of high school, I went to Europe. I really thought that what I wanted to do was be a professional rider. So I went
Mm.
and rode at some barns in Europe, and for people who don't know, I'm from Canada. I'm from British Columbia, Canada. So went out to Europe and went to some incredible facilities where on the outside it looked like they had it together. They had wonderful staff. They had beautiful, warm, cozy, fresh box stalls for horses with turnouts and regular feed times and lots of exercise, ridden exercise. But a lot of the horses, you'd pull them out for their day and they would start exploding with what we'd call behavior problems. So that kind of tipped it a little bit for me. And I think that that was a wake-up call because of the area in BC that I live in. Yes, I was in a traditional lesson program, but our horses had a lot of access to the outdoors and other horses and friends. And so kind of diving properly into what the majority of the horse world looked like was a little bit shocking. And I was kind of going as a
Mm,
young person, you're trying to get this horse over this jump. They're obviously telling you that they're not happy about something.
yeah.
Why aren't we asking why?
Mm,
So the first place that I took that was actually Equine Bodywork, and I was already a personal trainer, so that was an interesting thing for me
oh,
to like for humans. That's kind of where my brain went. I go, well, okay, we must be talking about, we've got a bit of a, possibly a welfare issue, and we could very well have undiagnosed pain issues, right? What are the pieces that we're not looking at? Because
mm,
on the outside, it looks like these horses have wonderful care. And really, they do. And these are people who are trying their very best, and these
yeah.
systems are kind of already set up. And so, anyhow, I ended up for quite some time working on pain management, fitness, and body work for horses.
Okay. Mm,
And then, interestingly, the same questions would come up. We're seeing patterns that are repeating, and we're seeing behavior patterns that are repeating, regardless of veterinary visits and visits
mm,
with me and detail-oriented clients who are doing their homework. We're still running against these other problems.
mm,
Right? Then we go, okay, well, how are we not meeting this horse's needs? Maybe there is that intersection between their behavior, how they evolved to live, and how they learn from under
mm.
a scientific lens, and kind of their physical well-being. And I mean, when we say this, the obvious answer is, of course there is, right? But it's kind of
Makes so
hard.
much sense. So you put it that way.
Yeah, of course there is. But so often we're taught to look at our horses through such a narrow lens that
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard to find those answers.
Yeah.
So that led me down the equine behavior road. And then that eventually led me to being certified through the IAABC, more continuing education, so on and so forth. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong because I do like to spin off. I think I remember the question, but where is the gap? Maybe what are we not noticing when we're assessing? Did I get it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Great
So
memory, by the way, because also it was a pretty complicated two-part question. And feel free to squirrel in as many directions as you like.
oh, thank you, because I am all squirrel. That is all that I am. Um,
Same.
yeah, I'm just a squirrel. So I think the second part of that question, looking at kind of what we're missing, especially looking at how those two things intersect when we're assessing these bigger problems, is going back to not just what am I missing? So, not just what is my horse doing that isn't working, but
Mm,
what does it look like when it does? And what factors contribute to that, right? So, if we have a
of
clear picture
course.
of what it is that we want our horses to be doing, and then instead of hard focusing on what's happening that we don't like, if we soften our focus out
Right.
and look at the bigger picture, that's usually kind of where the answers are. And that might be,
Mm,
and quite often is, our foundation, our horse's baseline of welfare. Well, maybe we have an off the track thoroughbred that's just transitioned to a hunter barn and it gets, let's say, no turnout
hmm.
and it cribs. And so we have a lot of building stressors, environmental stressors, plus we have a new environment. And then that could result in your big behavior problems that you didn't notice when you picked them up, when you decide to purchase them, because we have trigger stacking. It could result in back pain because maybe this horse is used to moving and a lot more than it is.
Mm,
And quite often it is that bigger picture. We go, okay, so we have a pain issue or we have a behavior problem. First, is there something that we need to simplify? Is there a need that we need to meet? So I would say I could super squirrel on that one, but but if we could zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger
mhm.
picture and how everything in the horse's life could possibly be contributing to what
Yeah.
we're trying to diagnose.
Absolutely. Maybe we scroll into that in another episode because I feel like that's such a huge area of interest. And like you mentioned earlier, we are accustomed, for whatever reason, to looking at horses through such a narrowly focused lens and not
Mhm.
really considering all of these other pieces. And so often when I bring those up to people in a saddle fitting, because, for example, it will come up often if I go to see a horse that's been off for maybe a few months and they're going to get started back under saddle and I palpate their back and their back is sore. And they're like, well, how is their back sore and they haven't been ridden? And it's like, well, how is your back sore and you haven't been ridden? Back soreness and being ridden aren't mutually exclusive things. There's a million and one things that can cause back soreness. And the challenge becomes if we can't address those or understand the underlying cause, we're not going to fix it when we start riding them necessarily. It needs to be something that we address and figure out what's compensating in their body, right? What is happening that's creating that strain in the first place in a non-ridden horse, for example. And I see this so often in horses that have rehabbed, for example, and they've been off for an extended period of time. And people are often really perplexed at their back sore when we go to check their saddle before they get back to work. And it's like, well, there's a lot of compensation patterns that they get into when they've had an injury, or if they're on stall rest, all of a sudden we've taken a body that's really designed to move a whole bunch and we've restricted that. And there's just so many pieces that go into it. But I love that you said cribbing, or depending if they have a hay net that's up high and that contracts all of the soft tissue and skeletal structures. I mean, there's just so many pieces. So I could also scroll in that direction for a very long time, but maybe we'll see if we have time at the end because we could always come back to it. And if not, we will just have to talk about it in another episode.
Sounds lovely.
Fabulous. Okay. So, Emma, I've listened to you speak before, and you often talk about subtle indicators or sort of quieter signs that our horses give us before the bigger issues become more obvious. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that people commonly miss? Some of those signals that you see in either movement or behavior, or even a change in the horse's disposition that might point to a deeper biomechanical or psychological or physiological barrier.
That's a great question. And thinking about maybe some simple pieces that people can kind of take home and think about when they take their horses out
Mm-hmm.
next. I would say that the first thing that maybe a little bit of homework for
Yeah.
everyone would
Love it.
be to think about, I know homework's the best.
It is. I
If
know,
you're
I'm
a
such a
nerd.
nerd. Our nerd is showing, Emma.
Yeah. So a little bit of homework for everyone is the next time you go out and grab your horse, check in with yourself throughout your tacking up process, your ride, or your groundwork, or whatever you're doing, and think about, what am I maybe normalizing?
Mm. Yeah.
And a lot can be missed when we normalize, and we do it because we see things so regularly. It loses priority, or we might miss something. But for instance, one of my horses here, she is really fussy about getting her blanket put on and off.
Mm.
She's extremely expressive. If I normalize that, then I might be missing some key signs and signals that tell me that maybe she has ulcers or back pain, or maybe
Yeah.
there's been a handling issue that I need to address. So let's start thinking about what we normalize. The other thing I see normalized regularly would be, let's say every time you get on your horse, they invert. Maybe the head comes up, or my horse always struggles with our left lead,
Mm.
that left lead canter, but that's been them always, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
That's such a big one.
So thinking about the things that we may be normalizing in our horse's behavior that can actually be a symptom of something much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason we normalize would be, I think that it can be really overwhelming when there's something we see regularly and we don't have the answer,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and then when we
Because it
don't
can
have
feel
the
really
answer,
helpless.
yes, exactly. It really does. It can feel really helpless. And it
Yeah.
might be something that your trainer or your community has minimized as well. So we're not just dealing with how we feel about it, we're also dealing with the pressures that we're under, or maybe kind of pushing us to move through a program or get better, or get to the
Yeah.
show. So these things that are actually little signs that something's not quite right, you push it aside. So maybe
Yeah.
if your horse is girthy, you just kind of whip through it really quickly because you got to get to your lesson.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, you realize that your horse is still girthy, but maybe you've
Mhm.
had behavior escalations in other areas. So, and it could have
Mhm.
been that first signal that something wasn't quite right. So if we just, for people out there, go to the barn and just think, what may I be normalizing in my horse's day to day that might be worth
Mhm.
a closer look? So that's the first thing. Another thing to think about is maybe something is frustrating your horse, and what does that look like?
Mm.
So it could be, let's say, every time you turn to the left, your horse pins its ears. Could be soft tissue tension. So when we're talking about subtle signs that your horse is not doing well, either in their psychology or their body, that could be they're doing the behavior that you're asking them to do, but they're doing it with a lot of tension. So start paying attention to the little whispers. Your
Yeah.
horse is whispering all the time. Then get curious, because what do we do with it? Sometimes we don't know how to solve the problem. If
Mhm.
we're cultivating our curiosity, there's more of an opportunity for us to figure out what that is. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's
Okay.
fabulous because those are
Hmm.
perfect examples of things that people so often complain about. And it's tricky because I find saddle fitting is such an interesting realm because
Hmm.
we've kind of gotten to a point where people almost want everything to be fixed with saddle fit. And we can fix so much in terms of helping them be more comfortable and compensating for things that they're struggling with and their symmetry and all of this. But at the end of the day, if they're having biomechanical issues and there's something pain related that's deeper rooted, we can alleviate one source of discomfort. So they might kind of go from this level of discomfort and that drops down a little. So the baseline is better, but we haven't fixed the root cause of it. We've just fixed one of the triggers that was being stacked on top. And I find
Hmm.
people are can be quite reluctant to dig deeper once they've addressed the saddle piece. And that's hard
Yes.
because of course the saddle fitters, we're not magicians. So we can't fix the saddle and all of a sudden your horse's hoof angle and their soundness is improved if there's a deeper lying cause that's creating the soundness issue, for example. If it was just a saddle related soundness issue, great. Then you're off to the races. But often if the saddle has been ill fitting, we've got some damage that then needs repair in order for them to actually get back to a healthier baseline. Even in that case, fixing the cause of the problem doesn't necessarily rectify or remedy the damage that's been done prior to fixing it. So there's just a lot of pieces there. And I love encouraging people to get curious and observe their horses more because at the end of the day, it's funny how we'll pick up on things that are maybe a little more convenient for us to notice. Oh, he loves treats, or oh, he hates that horse. But if it's more related to something we are doing with them or asking them to do, what I've noticed is an inclination for us to assign more malice to it. Oh, they just won't do it. Oh, they're just grouchy. And it's like, so if they're grouchy towards that horse, they don't like that horse. But if they're grouchy towards me, they're grouchy. And I think it's really pivotal to start breaking those pieces apart a little bit more and just casually observing without maybe our own internal bias as to what's going on to say, oh, okay, like they can't bend left because I often hear they won't bend left. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, or they won't pick up that lead. Maybe even just rethinking the vernacular that we're using around that. Maybe they can't. Often, if they used to do it and have always done it before, and suddenly they aren't doing it, it's not that they won't do it. It's that something has happened that now they cannot do it physically. So the biomechanical pieces there are so important.
I'm going to tangent on your tangent if that's okay.
Please. Absolutely.
So yes, there's lots of pieces to think about. And I often say to my clients, if we're justing or shoulding, right? They should. Usually that's minimizing the bigger picture, right?
I love that.
So whenever you catch yourself justing or shoulding, it's time to look a little deeper. And sometimes we're
Mm,
doing that because it's emotional for us. Sometimes it's hard
absolutely.
and overwhelming. It might
Yeah.
make us feel like we're failing or we're not a good enough
Yes.
rider, right? Maybe we feel
Mhm.
like it's a reflection on how our horse feels about us or our relationship. I think that it's a really emotional sport. There's a reason why we're
Big
into
time.
horses and not bicycles, right? Because we're into the relationship and the emotional, the whole thing, caring for another animal, having them care for
Mhm.
you. It brings up a lot for us. And when things aren't going well, just like in our human relationships, there's a lot that can come up for us.
Yeah.
And I think the just and the should is a great coping mechanism so that we don't have to look
Mhm.
deeper and go,
Right.
A, how do we solve this? But also B, how does this make me feel about myself? So the
Mhm.
just and the should can definitely be maybe a bit of a cue for everybody to go, is there
Yeah.
something else here for me to look at?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you were talking about the biomechanical end of things and looking for these subtle signals that there's a larger issue and a little bit of that trigger stacking. So for people, and you've probably talked about this in your podcast, but for people who don't
Yeah.
understand trigger stacking, it's the word for basically when your day goes wrong. And if you think about maybe why my day went wrong,
Our
which
day,
we
Emma.
can both relate to today, right? And it is. It's exactly that. It's the this morning my day was scheduled too tight. So I had to ask Katrina to move our podcast interview a half an hour later. Then I wake up to a new foot of snow and no roads being plowed. So then I'm another half hour just feels like behind all day with this
Yeah.
looming wonderful appointment coming up that I'm trying to make on time. And then by the time that I get there, I'm wet and cold, and then my computer equipment isn't working correctly. And thank goodness I have some skills to deal with that. If I was my horse, I might just like stomp on my laptop. You know, that's part of that looking at the bigger picture. So it might be we have a saddle that doesn't fit. You improve the saddle fit like you talked about, that trigger stack. We're thinking of it like a cape, right? So
Yeah.
you pull the saddle fit issue out and you have a little
Mhm.
bit of an improvement, but your client doesn't see the grand improvement that they want to see. Maybe that horse is not getting enough turnout time. Their best friend got moved to a different stall and their training intensity has increased
Yeah.
and they haven't been conditioned to be comfortable with water jumps yet. It's just there's a whole bunch of pieces. If we think about our horse's day a little bit more like our day and go, there's a lot that contributes to a horse that's both physically and mentally healthy. And those two pieces do talk to each other an awful lot. I think that
Mhm.
could put us in a better position to help our horses. So there you, I squirreled.
I love it. Well, I think it's such a perfect and relevant comparison because it
Mhm,
is so interesting how we know how these things affect us in our lives, in
mhm,
our days. And it's funny, you were saying if you were a horse, you just stomp on your laptop. Before we started, I said to Emma, okay, let's just take a minute. We could decompress because none of my tech was working. I couldn't get my webcam or my mic to work, or my webcam worked, but then my mic wouldn't work. And then when I switched the ports, neither would work. And then I couldn't get either of them working after that. It was like, okay, there was an audio lag. So we had to sign out. Then I accidentally turned off my computer and I joked to Emma, I am so often guilty. Like the one thing that will almost always get the best of me in terms of my emotional regulation skills and like, being able to work through things is technology. And a lot of it is my internal narrative around the fact that I'm not good with technology and whatever, or learned helplessness, which horses have. And so that's a real physiological thing because we've got the psychological components, but we've also got the physical stressors when we start to get frustrated. And I know I'm not good with technology. So then I'm a bit more anxious. I'm already a little on edge because I'm late. And, I'm trying to not look like a disaster, like a complete squirrel. I'm sick. So all these things stack, and just having the realization that horses, if we haven't given them the tools or we can't help them to kind of
mhm.
regulate, luckily, just so y'all know, I didn't lose it. I was very proud of myself. But to be honest, I think part of that is likely that I've been off sick for a couple weeks now. So I'm not taxed, running all over the place, caught in traffic, dealing with all kinds of different dynamics that are out of my control. I've been at home so I can meditate and sleep, and I've been resting. So I was in a better state already to handle the challenges that came my way. But similarly, if our horse is already up to here because they've had a stressful day, there was a storm last night, they haven't slept, they're already in pain, their neighbor moved, and then we bring our dynamics to the table, whatever stress that we have going on, and things can really escalate so quickly. So it's kind of looking at it through that lens. So that's my daily scroll.
Love it.
Oh my goodness. I was telling Emma earlier that in one of the recent episodes, my best friend Laura called me the queen of the chaos lizards. So we call it chaos lizarding when you're just like, oh, off. You know how lizards just move super quickly and spastically? We always joke that we're chaos lizards, and now I've been dubbed queen of the chaos lizards, which is quite an honor, I have to say, and probably the most accurate thing I have ever heard to describe me. So I'm really glad that we're in such good company with each other today.
Yes. I feel like I am also a queen of the chaos lizards. So,
Well, hey, reigning queens. I love this for us. Okay, so on that note, Emma, I want to talk a little bit about performance issues. And I mean, we've just talked about my performance issues today with the technology. But if we're talking about horses, I feel like so often we see performance issues labeled as training problems or behavioral or attitude problems. How does your more science-based understanding of how horses learn and their physiology changing the way we interpret resistance, tension, or unwillingness?
Okay, great question. So I think that a lot of the times when we're looking at performance problems in performance horses, especially, we jump to behavior suppression instead of fixing behavior or really truly changing behavior. So, what behavior science gives us is a deeper understanding of how our horses actually operate, and not only how they operate, but how they interpret their environment and world and operate within the world. And then we can use those tools to work with them in a way that's supportive and familiar to help problem solve. Let's say you've got a horse that really struggles to go on trail rides, does okay leaving the farm, but on the trail, it's just kind of losing it all the time. And this horse is supposed to be a competitive endurance horse. That can be a bit of a problem. And
Just a stitch.
it's not working out so well. But maybe with the science of how horses learn and their behavior, we might actually look at that horse's face and go, that horse has a dished face and a narrow nose. These trails are narrow and dark. Chances are this is a horse with excellent vision straight out in front of it, but poor periphery. So we need to help this horse. And let's say, just to use more familiar terms for people, let's say desensitize this horse in a kind, supportive way to environmental changes around and beside it, as well as moving through different kinds of light. We know how to do that in a way that doesn't add fear to an already scary situation, but actually reduces fear and improves confidence as well as problem solving. So this is the problem. If we are suppressing behavior, we're also suppressing our horse's ability to kind of diagnose their environment and problem solve with you. And for high performance, you want a horse that, let's say you're riding cross country, when those jumps get bigger, you don't want a horse that's just afraid of the jump. You want a horse that goes, this jump is bigger. I have to figure out how to navigate it. And that takes confidence and curiosity. And a horse that's just been suppressed, you get to that higher level and you might have an accident. A horse where we've kind of diagnosed and solved that foundation problem, when those jumps get big, it's safer and more fun for everyone. And aren't we always just kind of looking for an experience with a horse that feels like we're in it together? It's not riding a mountain bike. We're in it for partnership. You want to do it with this animal. So that's kind of what I want to cultivate, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I got away from the question.
No, that's great. I think that really helps us view it through a lens, even when you're talking about, okay, the dished face. So often I see people disregarding very obvious things like, oh, I have this 21-year-old horse who just came back from rehab for the 5th time and has had
Mhm.
countless injuries. And I'm just
Mhm.
gonna reef its head around to this side because it won't bend that way. It's like, it's let's just dial it back. It's got arthritis. It's got all these things. It's been
Mhm.
off for this amount of time. Why do we expect that it's going to come back and do everything that we want it to do perfectly? Because
Mhm.
that's not the reality of bodies. That's not the reality
No.
of nervous systems. That's whether
Mm-mm.
it's fascia, skeletal, muscular, any of it.
Mhm.
We get tension and we get issues creeping up, especially if they've been on rest or if they're not getting turned out, they're not moving around. And just looking at those a little bit more honestly, looking at our horse's conformation, looking at some of the other things
Mhm.
that they're struggling with. So often, again, we almost glaze over those or they don't even occur to us.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's a huge gold mine almost when you start digging in terms of finally being able to understand what we're actually dealing with our horses and what they're actually dealing with. So that ultimately helps us get to the other side of the problem so much more efficiently without feeling like we're banging our head against the wall, hopefully. So I think that's the thing that can be so emotionally draining for us as riders is, and I know I've been there so many times, you blame yourself and you feel inadequate and you're frustrated that you can't figure it out. And it becomes
Mhm.
this whole additional kind of shame loop if you can't figure out what's going on with your horse, even if the vets can't figure it out, like the trained professionals can't figure it out. But as their owners, as their stewards through life, we have this expectation of ourselves that we should be able to solve the problems. And I feel like that's the importance of having professionals like yourself that can help just open our eyes a little to the pieces that we might be missing that might actually hold the key to what's going on.
Absolutely. And I would say we all kind of need a team. A lot of my clients who are getting into higher level riding, they might have got the horse with all the potential and the athletic ability, and they're fantastic riders and trainers. Now they're trying to push into this next level of whatever sport they're into, and they go, okay, this horse has all the scope, but I just can't stop them, or I can't turn them, or I just feel like having to be strong the whole time,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you need someone to come in and go, hey, actually, I think that your horse is experiencing a lot of stress in the arena. Can we
Yeah.
make it a little bit more fun? Or
Hmm.
maybe they don't have fantastic joint stability because they're just being developed, right?
Yeah.
And we know joint stability impacts confidence and performance. So there's something going on here, and you do often need your team, another set of eyes, especially when we're under all of this pressure to perform ourselves, to help us get there. Now, I'm going to squirrel for a second, speaking
I
about
was just going to
performance.
ask you to scroll too, so go for it.
Good. I'll squirrel first, then you squirrel. When my clients are buying horses for, let's say they want a little bit more oomph, they're ready for the next stage and the next step. And let's say it's jumping, show jumping. My horse is jumping. In fact, they're over jumping. They seem really into it, but I can't stop them. They're not listening. They're not turning. And by the end, we're dropping bars. Then you might actually go, okay, so we have a lot of athletic potential, but where are we on our line of focus? So
Mhm.
for your horse, on a scale of, let's say, one is they're sleeping in a sunbeam. They're so relaxed. In fact, I can feel it right now. I really
I was
wish that there
gonna
was some
say,
sunbeams
just
going on here. And then we have 10 is they're just vibrating. They can't handle anything at all. Often when we're shopping for horses and we're thinking sport horses, we're thinking, I want something powerful. I want something hot. And let's say, if it's on a scale of 1 through 10, we're kind of buying an 8. Or we think that they're supposed to operate like an 8 because that means they're into it and they're going to be focused and they're going to be athletes. We actually want to be working with them, and I'm saying this because it's something I wish more of my clients, more people knew, is I want the calm, I want the kind of grounded focus. So I want a 5 or a
Mm.
6. I want a horse that is relaxed enough to be present and working with you, but into their job enough to be attentive to their environment and being able
Mm.
to think quickly, right?
Right.
So we want the athleticism, but them operating in such a high level of stress, whether that's excitement or anxiety, and quite often in the brain, those are very, very close. The brain is interpreting them the same way.
Mhm.
We're not actually going to be performing optimally. So we need to bring that horse kind of back down to that 5, 6, and then you're in a better place of learning. But we push those more anxious athletes too quickly, too far, too fast, when I think they actually need a little bit more time so we can kind of take their energy dial and drop it a little bit, and they're going to
Mhm.
be those partners we want to be riding, especially at those higher levels. So anyway, so that's my opportunity to drop that tiny little squirrel in. All right, your
I
turn to
love it.
squirrel.
Okay, thank you. So, this was something that I learned from you when I last heard you speak, and it sent me down my own rabbit hole in terms of my own personal hypermobility. But you had mentioned, and you alluded to it earlier, that we know that joint laxity or mobility that we're breeding for now, we want these like big flashy movers with quick knees and really big extensions. Regardless of what discipline, we're kind of going to the max of the athletic capabilities of the equine body in terms of how we're breeding horses.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned that we have now found a connection between anxiety levels in horses that have this kind of more extreme movement. So could you just tell the audience a little bit about that? Because I was like, what? That's wild. And it makes so much sense because I'm seeing, as a professional that's been in the industry for so long, I'm constantly seeing things where I'm like, these horses are just so amped and so anxious almost all the time, but especially when they're moving. And it's like, okay, is it this? Is it that? Is it the other thing? But this gave me a huge amount of insight when you shared it.
Yeah, it's really neat. So it shows how much power our breeders have, really. So we know now that certain physical traits are actually tied to certain behavioral traits. And these are hard things to study. There's a reason why we don't know a lot about it yet. There was a study that looked at horse colors and different behavior, like your blacks are more likely to be bold, right? Your reds are more likely to have environmental sensitivity. So now we get to your elastic, flashy, stunning, uh, excessively mobile. There's connections to anxiety. And I think that we're actually seeing a lot of that in the horse industry, especially in our show horses, because what sells a really flashy mover. But then we're
Yeah.
looking at these horses and going, why are they behaving this way? We've also seen an increase in these particular type of behavior issues. And it turns out that your hypermobility is connected to higher levels of anxiety. So I think that our breeders are actually probably more than they want to be, poor
Yeah.
things, a bit in the power seat here,
Yeah.
right? So as we're learning more about, these physical traits that we're breeding for, I think that our breeders kind of keeping up on these pieces that we're learning can be positively impacting the experience of these horses when they're out in the
Mm.
world by taking some consideration into kind of the science that is giving us more information, right? So this is
Yeah.
this is why science exists. I mean, it changes. We still have to keep an eye on it. Won't be disproven tomorrow. That's kind of the beauty of it, actually. It's ever evolving and changing, and you have to watching it carefully. But yeah, our breeders, I think, may not always realize that they're little scientists, and
Mhm.
yep, could be really positively impacting our horse world. So let's go back to the hypermobile horse. And for people going, oh my God, that's my horse, because I bet you there's a lot of them right now going, oh my God, that's my horse.
Yeah.
Um, right? For sure, we can have, a highly anxious horse with excessive mobility, but we are seeing, and I don't know if we've done any studies in this with regards to horses yet, but we have in dogs and humans, increasing joint stability can reduce anxiety.
Mm.
So we want to start working on, and that's what I say to a lot of my clients. Let's go and look at your horse's joint stability and see what they're needing and see if we can help them with that. And sometimes it's those what feel like little fixes, the little exercises. It almost feels benign in the bigger picture that has this big impact and
Mhm.
will make your life a whole lot easier and improve some horse welfare.
That's so fascinating. And I feel like
Mhm.
this is why I love having these conversations because if we're open to learning, it just never stops. I'm constantly learning new things about horses and things like the hypermobility piece and the anxiety piece. I was like, holy cow. So, so cool. Now,
Mhm.
Emma, you work with both rehab and high performance horses. What does
Yeah.
ethical performance look like to you? And how can riders sort of balance their ambitions with sort of what we might consider true horse welfare and well being?
Possibly a big question, but I'm going to kind of do my best not to squirrel too hard. So what does ethical performance look like to me? I think that ethical performance looks like we're still getting to do all of these wonderful activities that we do in partnership with our horses, but we're all healthy and having fun. I want to see those foundational pieces being addressed at the baseline, the building blocks of your horse is building that beautiful physical foundation. So joint
Mm,
stability, proprioception, so body awareness. So we're looking at balance, body awareness, joint stability. So that's the physical training foundation. If all of my clients' horses had those little foundational pieces, then they would be getting to where they want to go a lot faster. And then from the
mm,
behavior end of things, the foundation is relaxation, focus, and curiosity. And that creates your adaptive learner who's in a
mm,
mindset where the horse can be enjoying their job, assessing and adapting to their environment to be a good partner to you, the rider. So your job is to go, hey, horse, we're going to go this way. We're going to do this behavior. Then we're going to go that way and we're going to do that behavior. And the horse gets to go, okay, all right, I'm hearing what you're laying down. I think we're going to approach this like this. And that looks a little weird over there, but we've done a lot of work around that. So I think I got it. It's more of this kind of confident, cooperative look on performance. And people get worried when they start having to address behavior. We call it like maladaptive behaviors, but problem
mm,
behaviors would be what people would be more used to, or those foundational fitness issues because they think that they're going to slow down their progress. But remember, if you're just suppressing an issue over time, that issue is going to keep on bubbling up. And when you get into that higher level of riding, it's going to cause problems because that's where it really, really matters. You might be able to suppress an issue down here when you're just learning with your horse, but if it's a
mm.
big fence or you're getting into those like gorgeous sliding stops or spins or the big long endurance ride, whatever we're talking about, it's those little pieces that create those winners. And if you address it when you see
Mhm.
it, you're going to get there so much faster. So be a little bit more present with your horse right now and less hard focused on that faraway goal. And it's actually going to help you get there. So back to the how do I see like welfare focused performance? I would say I want to see in the future confident horses having a good time with their people at whatever level they're playing at. Did that answer
Yeah.
your question? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Now, in terms of the programs that you put together for people, their horses, that sort of thing, I know they're highly individualized,
Mhm.
and I'm curious.
Yeah.
So often we see these one size fits all cookie cutter approaches to rehab
Mhm.
or helping horses. Why do you feel like those are so limiting for horses? And what shifts when we actually start to move towards a program or a system that is more designed for a particular horse and their unique needs?
So I think that these training programs, they exist for a reason. I think that those kind of, let's call it like the cookie cutter approach to something. When we're first learning something new, we need to drown in it a little bit to
Yeah.
get it into our systems. We want to be talking it and feeling it and thinking about it. And that's really one way that we as people learn. But in that system, that's going to limit your approach to your horse. So when you realize, let's say you've subscribed to a particular training style, think about, okay, I've learned a lot here, but I need a big toolkit because every horse is an individual. In fact, I would even say, like, when we're talking about like the scientific principles of learning, or fitness, really, there's these principles that is kind of like our science cookie cutters. And they're great cookie
Mm,
cutters, some of the best ones. But you always have to look at the horse in front of you and think
mm,
about what they're telling you. So when we're talking cookie cutter approaches, yes, on the one hand, it's great for your initial learning. That's why we go to school. We're diving headfirst
Mm,
into one focus. Then you
right.
leave school and you branch out and you start taking in a lot of new information that makes you more versatile and gives you a much bigger toolkit. You're less likely to unintentionally cause harm to the horse, which happens, and we've all
Mm-mm.
been there. I certainly have.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, I was telling Katrina that I've had one of my horses for possibly more than 20 years. And she went, "Oh, that must be so nice." And I go, "Yes, also my poor horse has gone through a lot of my learning." So it does. It happens to all of us. But a more tools to pull from gives you more opportunity to help the horse in front of you faster, really. We need
Yeah.
flexibility and curiosity. And if my clients are in the curious headspace, they're a lot more likely to reach out and find those answers instead of going, but this is what the book says, or this is what
Yeah.
my coach says. This is how it is. As soon as you're going,
Yeah.
this is how it is, then you're locked into one way of solving a problem, and it'll probably be a lot less successful.
Yeah. I feel like for anybody listening, if that feels overwhelming, I have also done way more wrong in my life with horses than I've probably done right. But it's never too late to start being like, ooh, I'm not sure I liked how I approached that. I
Yeah.
might need to learn a little more. I might need to educate myself. I might need to rethink what assumptions I have around this sort of behavior for the horse, or how I'm approaching it as a human, because there's just so much to it. And there's so much on the other side of that as well. Like when you start reassessing, I feel like there's an ease for me anyway that's come with it. I'm just like, oh, okay. So I feel like I'm still a total noob, and I've kind of accepted that that will probably never change. It's like the more you know nothing. But it's also like, okay, so then I can learn. And there's just so many great resources now, which is awesome. And
Absolutely.
on
And I just want to put this out to any trainers and coaches out there. So often, as trainers and coaches, you guys feel under a lot of pressure to know everything right now.
Mhm.
And that can be so, so hard because that leaves very little room for that curiosity and flexibility. But
Yeah.
cultivating an environment where your clients can see that it's okay when you make mistakes and are learning and growing,
Mm.
that's going to really help how they talk to themselves and see themselves and their horses and give more space to them. So I just want to give all those guys out there permission to just go, hey, it's okay when I make mistakes. I want to model what that is to my people. And that'll allow for a lot more growth in our industry too.
I love that. It's such a good
Mhm.
point, because I do feel like so much of the struggle is challenged by the things above us, whether it's our own perceptions of what we should be, or what our coaches are telling us, or the coaches feeling like they have to be perfect and they have to know everything for their clients in order to be worthwhile. And it's just not the case. Like, we're all always
Yeah.
learning. And I sort of look at it like, if the vast majority of time a vet can't diagnose the lameness issue or anything like that, like, we don't fault them. It's like, yeah, it's a complex body and complex systems, and that's just kind of the norm. And yet, I feel like as riders or as equine professionals, we sometimes put too much pressure on ourselves to know everything, and it's just not a realistic standard. I think more realistic is being open to learning, making mistakes, and just owning the fact that we don't know it all. We can't know it all, but we're open to finding out and doing better.
Absolutely. Well put.
Thank you. See, I feel like you probably have already sort of answered this, because I was going to ask if there's any particular mindset shift that you might recommend for riders or professionals who are feeling overwhelmed by conflicting advice or external pressures. How can they maybe shift to start improving or supporting their horse in their body and their nervous system?
Good question. So, what I would say is, I like to tell clients when you're presented with a problem, always think, how can I help my horse? And that's a
Yeah.
really great way to kind of shift you into that curious mindset that we talked about. Instead of going, my horse isn't getting its left lead. "Ah, I got to do that again. Why isn't my horse getting its left lead?" If you go, how can I help my horse? Then that might set you into kind of that bigger picture instead of that hard focus, that open kind of taking it all in focus, and go, all right, my horse isn't understanding this, or it's hard for
Yeah.
them. Maybe it's setting up the environment differently to give them a little more feedback. Or maybe they're not feeling balanced to the left today. Maybe, right?
Yeah.
But just that if we always go, how do I help my horse? Then instead of the going into that kind of darker space where either my horse is doing something to me, or I'm not a good enough rider, or I don't know enough, or why isn't my relationship good enough with my horse? Instead of sitting there, then we're in that strategic thinking, curious problem solving kind of scientist brain. You're just pulling
Yeah.
apart the pieces and going, my horse is always behaving like a horse. That's all they're doing. They're not doing something to me, right? They're just behaving in
Mhm.
space. Now, how can I help them get the answer that I'm trying to teach them? Curious mindset. How can I help my horse? Might help you get there. And they're just doing horse stuff. Oh,
Yeah, they didn't wake up and decide, "I'm gonna mess with her day today." They're just being horses.
sometimes it feels like that. I get it. They are just
Yes.
right, but
Mhm.
they are just doing their horse thing. We can try and be a really clear teacher, and sometimes our students don't always follow a lesson plan the way we want them to, and we have to write a whole new one.
Yeah. Hey, same. I mean, look at us. We might have a
Yeah,
plan, but we're
today.
still gonna squirrel. Squirrels be squirreling.
Yeah, see, we've demonstrated trigger stacking and problem solving with open and curious mindsets today beautifully.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I would love to chat a little
Mhm.
bit about your work with Annika McGivern at Illuminate Equine, because I know you and Annika each bring really cool expertise, but from slightly different angles. So, how would you say your skill sets complement one another? And what have you guys found becomes really possible for both horses and riders when we combine the behavior, the biomechanics, and the rider influence?
Really appreciate you asking that question. So Annika and I started Illuminate because we had a client that we shared overseas that we went to work with, and we were blown away by the speed of which these lessons integrated when we
Mm.
had both the rider psychology, understanding of horse movement, and the horse psychology or learning all working together. Now, of course, there's the beauty of Annika's work. So Annika is our sports psychology badass. She's fantastic, and anyone
Yes.
should, even if you're not hiring me, please contact Annika and hire her because she's wonderful. Annika sets the stage by getting you in the right learning mindset and helping you work through your fears and building your focus. And I do the exact same thing for the horse. Now, interestingly, there's great research on how these two pieces interact. And I know we don't have
Mm.
6 hours for this podcast, so I will encourage people to look at some of Dr. Steve Peters' work. And he's a neuroscientist, and he talks about especially training the horse's nervous system and kind of the interaction between our nervous system and the horse's nervous system. But I will say,
And you
just
just had
to
him on
give
your
you a taste of
podcast,
some of the science behind this. Oh, yes, I just had him on
right?
my podcast. I felt like that would be a shameless plug, so I avoided it. So
Yeah,
thank you for
no,
doing
I'm
that
all
for
about
me.
it. I listened to the episode and I'm like, oh, we got to let people know if they should listen to his stuff, they should listen on your podcast.
He's wonderful. Check out my podcast and listen to him on my most recent episode. So,
Yes, we will link
yeah,
that too.
he's wonderful. For instance, there was a study done where they took human sweat after they watched a bunch of different movies. So, scary movies, happy movies, sad movies, and they brought that sweat to horses, and your horse can actually identify your mood accurately. They
So
can
cool.
smell your emotional state. Let's just say that simply. They can read your facial expressions. We've proven that as well. And there's some co regulation of our nervous systems that happen. So, when we have both pieces together, when you have the rider working on their nervous system regulation and focus, you're going to be impacting your horse. And then on the other side of that, too, when we're working through your horse's internal stuff or their physical stuff that impacts them and their behavior, And that also impacts you too. So it's not just one direction. It's not just all the onus on your shoulders going, "Oh my God, I'm afraid and I have to regulate my horse's nervous system and I'm just having a hard time and it's all on me." No, we actually want to help your horse with their stuff too separately. They got their remember it's a team. It's a team sport. So we help the horse, we help you. Those two pieces work together and then we can get to where you want to go a lot faster. So that's why we started Illuminate. It's this beautiful relationship between ourselves and these animals that we love so much. And it's so
Mm-hmm.
powerful that working on the two pieces at the same time can be very beneficial. Thank you for asking that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my
Mhm.
pleasure. And it's so
Mhm.
cool, and I'm glad that it gave you the opportunity to dive into the piece about horses being able to smell even the emotional state that we're bringing to the table. Because again, I feel
Mhm.
like that's something that we don't necessarily consider so much of the time. I don't want to be like, yeah, we're the problem, but hey, it's me. Hi. Just saying, throwing it out there. It's just such a huge piece. And it's tricky
Mhm.
because I feel like so often the response that we as riders will give to a situation that's not going well is frustration or
Mhm.
fear, anger
Yes.
sometimes. And so the hard part is, maybe the hardest part is that will make the situation worse. And then it gets worse. And then we get more fearful, more frustrated, more angry. And then we wonder why it devolves so quickly. So I love that you guys work with both horse and rider to help give everybody the tools that they need to succeed and have fun in partnership. Because really that's what it's all about. Right.
Yeah, we want everyone to be having fun and making things a
Yeah.
little bit simpler too. Because quite often
Yes.
that's it. It's kind of dialing it back and going, okay, so I have some tools in my toolkit to manage myself. My horse has tools to manage themselves as well. And then let's work it together. Just kind of going, the foundation of what we want comes down to some seemingly simple, I can say that they're simple, but creating these new patterns can be challenging for us. So it's nice, again, back to we need our team of people to help us be the horse
Mhm.
we want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've kind of described that you work best with clients who are curious and adaptable and really kind of willing to step
Mhm.
outside of what they know. We've talked about that a bunch already today, but I'm curious, what would you say that openness looks like in practice and how does it end up impacting the outcome for the horse?
Okay, another good question. So that the client openness, I would say, is when you're working with what we're talking about today. So how your horse works, really. We're having to step away from a lot of patterns and the things that we know or the things that have been instilled in us from coaches of past
Mhm.
or current, or just our own stories that we have, these stories about ourselves and these stories about our horses. When we're pulling those pieces apart, it can be hard to look at those things. And then you also have to start building new stories in and bringing new information in. And that's kind of where I come in. I'm going, okay, so you're feeling this, and this is what you've learned, and this is the story that you have.
Mhm.
But what's actually going on here is this, and this is how we can help. So I would say those curious, open minded clients, usually that's why you're calling me, anyways. You're wanting something different, right?
Mhm.
But that's what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people who are curious and feel okay being vulnerable enough to pull the old story apart and maybe build a new story. I don't know if that was clear or
Mhm.
not.
Yeah, yeah. For anybody who might feel a little bit intimidated by change
Mhm.
or by any of the things that we've talked about, what would you
Mhm.
say, maybe for somebody who wants to do better for their horse, but they're afraid to step outside of their comfort zone? Could you give them any advice?
Absolutely. So it can be hard. I do a lot of in-person work in clinics. I do a lot of virtual work too. And I am lucky in that
Okay.
I'm in this little niche area in BC. It's kind of safe to think different and be a little bit different.
Mm.
And we're not all in those situations. A lot of us are in very strict
Yeah.
programs, and being different feels scary and hard. So, what I'd say to those
Hmm.
people, and it doesn't always feel safe, and that's okay. So,
Yeah.
making little changes that you feel good about is the first step. And that
Mm.
might be just simply like that homework that I gave earlier. It might be something internal where you get to go, what have I normalized in my horse? So that might
Mhm.
be that first step. And that's something you can do privately that can start that kind of curious process in a really safe way. So I would say that there's the big changes we wish that everyone would make, but it's not always possible. If you can start with those little changes, changes in perspective, ways that you can do something a little differently that feel better to you, that feel safe to get that started, I would say that's our first step.
Love that.
Doesn't always have to be big.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's a big part of it is just making it feel approachable, realistic, and safe. Because, like
Mhm.
you said, in so
Yes.
many barn environments, it may not feel that way. They may not be open
Yeah.
minded. They may not be open. Or if your coach is insistent that the problem is this, but you maybe have a feeling deep down that it's something else. I always encourage people, you know your horse better than anybody. And so if your gut, your instincts are telling you, A, there's something wrong, or B, it's not what people are saying it is, go with that. Because there's nothing wrong with at least exploring other possibilities and getting curious about what might be happening for your horse. Because so often
Mhm.
we again are looking at it with this lens and we're saying, oh well, it's just this. They're just grouchy.
Mhm.
I hear
Yeah.
this all the time. And it's like, well, that's a bit of a simplification where we maybe just don't want to look at what might be going on for them. And so there's just lots of ways, like you shared, that we can start to dig in and just explore. And the more we know, the more we're empowered to do the right thing. Whatever that might be. And it's going to be different in every situation for every horse, for every rider. But there's nothing more frustrating than being on the wrong track. And feeling like you're beating your head against a wall or getting nowhere when we're trying so hard, especially because it is expensive and it is
Mhm.
stressful when we can't figure out what's going on for our horses. Um,
Absolutely. I would say get curious and take little steps that feel good to you.
mhm.
And absolutely, Katrina, I like what you said. Trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, get curious.
Yeah, big time. Now, Emma,
Mhm.
I would love to know if there are any changes that you would love to see moving forward in the equine industry when it comes to how we're approaching behavior and biomechanics with horses.
I would love our industry leaders to take an interest in horse evolution, looking at how
Mm,
they've evolved to live. When we're meeting those needs, then we're going to have horses with less lameness issues and our psychological issues or behavior issues.
yeah.
So, moving forward, what I'd love to see is just a focus back on what did our horses evolve to do over a long, long, long time. And then how do we create
Mhm.
this for them in the environment that we've put them in? And then we're just going to have a healthier horse and an experience that's a whole lot more fun for everybody.
Mm.
So, good question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well answered. Now, I feel like that brings us to the end of our time today, Emma, but I'm so, so grateful for you joining us. Now, Emma and I are going to be doing a podcast swap. So you can find Emma at Friends on Horses podcast, which we will link. We will also link Illuminate Equine and Dynamic Equine. So Dynamic is Emma's website and Illuminate is her website where she works with Annika McGivern. And so you guys will
Mhm.
have all of those resources. And Emma, if somebody wants to follow you on socials, where can they find you?
If you look up Emma Kjelson, Equine Mind and Body, which really I just need to change it to Dynamic, that's where you'll find me. But the good news
Okay.
is my last name is so strange that if you
Yes.
look up my last name, so if you look up Emma Kjelson, Kjelson, there's no one else out there. So you will find me on social media.
Wonderful. And we will link that profile as well for everybody in the show notes. Well, thanks again, Emma, for sharing your time and your expertise on animal behavior and biomechanics. I feel like every time we chat, I learn so much, and I can't wait to do the next episode of Friends on Horses for your podcast and chat further. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much. And we totally got through despite trigger stacking. And thank you.
Yes.
And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Likewise. Excellent. Well, and for all of our viewers, thank you so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until then, stay curious and stay unbridled. Take care, everyone.